Thank you for joining the Palm Day podcast today with Zemplee founder and CEO Aparna Pujar. To make sure you don't miss our next conversations, subscribe. Welcome, Aparna, and we're happy to have you listeners here today. We are Palmistay, and our brand has been created to help us age as independently as possible for as long as possible. And the best way to do that is if we're all informed. We are aiming to bring individuals and the people they love most together with information that is going to help us all age well. So that goes for me and my family, and Ashwini and hers, and Aparna, you and yours, and all of our listeners out there.
Zemplee exemplifies dignity and privacy through passive monitoring technology that is placed in living facilities. Zemplee also improves the quality of life for seniors who choose to age in place by using their strategically placed AI-powered sensors and devices throughout their private residences. They do this without the use of cameras or microphones, and their AI learns your loved one's daily activities through the use of their motion sensors. Their goal is to lighten the workload of caretakers and provide family members with updates on their loved one's health, well-being, and safety. Thank you, Aparna. We're really excited to chat with you more about Zemplee and your interest in this space. Could you start by telling us a little bit about kind of what motivated you to start building in the senior care space?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to share my story and also the challenges that we're facing as a community, as a population. I started Zemplee because I became a remote caregiver for my aging parents who live in India. Remote caregiving was an order of magnitude complicated for me because every incident required me to spend hours, sometimes into wee hours of the morning, just because of the time zone difference, trying to figure things out, coax them, work with them, and also address their care needs. And oftentimes it also meant, being ready to pack a suitcase and board a plane and make a trip halfway across the world to take care of them. And as a family, both my husband and I were caring for our aging parents. In our household, it was pretty stressful. But through that experience, I sort of figured out that there was an opportunity for some kind of a solution that would make it easy for family caregivers to be better informed. I mean, that was where the crux of where our product started. Half the time it was getting access to information, which was a huge challenge for me. And it's not just information, it was really information about my parents, information about their care team, whether it's the doctors, the physicians, the clinicians, or the people who were providing care at home as well. And so it's just, my role was just coordinating between these stakeholders who were responsible for caring for my parents. So in some ways, I wanted to build something that would just simplify the process in such a way that, I was able to make better decisions knowing what was actually going on.
Yeah, care coordination is a problem that Erin and I have heard quite a few times. Did you have siblings? Did you mention a care team? Was your family member currently staying in a home or in a hospital of some kind?
No, so my parents were at home. Early on, my parents had decided that they would never want to be in a facility. So it was something of a declaration they made saying, we're going to live here and we're going to pass away in our home, which, is part of where they'd spent all their lives. And, we had grown up in those homes. So we had memories associated with being in that home. And I think those memories are what tied them to where they wanted to be. Taking them, uprooting them out of that comfort zone and bringing them into a new environment was challenging. I mean, first of all, they had to be willing. As a family, I mean, I have siblings and we all agreed that, they should continue to live where they want to live, because if that's their wish, we had to make it happen for them. In the coordination part itself involved, my dad was a chronic diabetic. So he had been on a diabetes management program for almost 25, 30 years. So, there was his clinical needs that had to be addressed. My mom was the primary caregiver. I mean, she was the control tower managing everything there, but she was also growing old. So, over time, her ability to care for him also started to diminish because, she was just naturally aging as well, in which case we had to supplement her time with some on-ground staff. And then there was, coordination with his doctors and his primary care physician, and oftentimes managing his blood sugar readings, things like that. So little things that sort of added up to a whole new level of needs that was hard for someone sitting, 8,000, 9,000 miles away to comprehend. I think if you look at the larger population today, we're all living longer. So, and the average human lifespan has increased. And we also live with a lot of chronic conditions. So, care is not just watching them and trying to help them with their movement from point A to point B or assisting with that. It's just become a whole degree complicated because of the clinical conditions that you have to work with. Typical person has at least about 4 or 5 comorbid conditions that you have to manage. And then each condition comes with its own set of medications and own set of treatment plans. So imagine how complex that can become, right? Suddenly you're looking at 20 to 30,000 data points to process, which drug interacts with what should he eat every day, what should he drink every day, sugar level, salt level, so nutrition. So it becomes really complicated just like that. And so how do you manage that when you also have your own life to live here, right? So we have family, we have kids. I had a full-time job. You imagine the level of chaos. I would come home and my next job would start, like literally talking to my parents and asking them how they were doing. And then go back to home, cook food for my family, and then back at 9 o'clock following up with them. So that was kind of the lifestyle. And I think is generally how every caregiver, who's caring for their parents is going through in today's world. The senior population, even as baby boomers are hitting that time, is going to double. And the projection is that, all of them are expected to live a good 20, 25 years from now. So you can imagine the level of care needed to help them. And I think out of sense of duty and love, we do want to do the right things for them. It's just a matter of how to make it palatable and easier, so that in the process of caring for them, you don't also become a victim and follow the same path, right? So that's the idea here.
To that point, maybe an observation and a question, Aparna. One observation that I have is, we have certain expectations of using technology for ourselves. And we even think that maybe we're going to be able to use technology when we're older. But the reality is, as we get older, there are limits to our ability to interface with technology regardless. Like, I might love playing computer games now, or, working on my phone, but when I'm older, I might not be able to. Can you talk a little bit about like what makes Zemplee's technology so interesting and compelling from a privacy perspective? Because our privacy continues to matter to us no matter how old we are.
Yeah, I think great question. When we were looking at this market, and I personally, through my own sort of experiments with my parents, I gave them a wearable, I gave them a lot of little cool things to do, and I saw how hard it was for them to change their lifestyle. It's very hard to go in and tell an 80-year-old person, okay, now you're going to start doing things a different way from tomorrow. So I decided to build something that was not dependent on them learning anything. But it was much easier for me to say, okay, I can learn new technology. I'm fairly technical, and I grew up in a generation where we were digital first, familiar with mobile labs, familiar with smart home technology and things like that. So we sort of looked at that carefully and says, oh, we need to build tools to help a caregiver. So that was our persona that we were targeting. And as a side effect of that, if the seniors that we were caring for were interested in, trying out new things, that was always a good thing. The crux of the matter is, as they age and the cognitive decline starts to kick in, some of these things become hard for them to manage. And my dad was at that point, he was an engineer himself. So up until he could do things, he was doing them. But the minute his health started deteriorating, it was hard for him to keep up. And so I needed something to supplement that. And which is why we went away from wearables and says, oh, we need to build something that's resilient and a fallback. So even if they forgot to use their watch or something like that, then there's always something that would still give us the signals that we wanted to know. Straight from the beginning, we said no digital cameras inside the home, no video cameras, no optic sensors, because privacy was important. The question of AI is always, what is the responsible use of AI here? And in many cases, because of the fact that the elderly people we care for need a lot of assistance and help. And there is the question of vanity and dignity that becomes important for them, because a large part of this demographic skews female, because women outlive men, statistically. Imagine having to constantly be under a camera being watched. I mean, that's not what you want for your dad and mom. I mean, we want them to feel like they're safe. And, although someone is really watching them, they're really not interfering in their lives, which is why we had to make the technology passive. As in, there's no video camera, it's not a surveillance system. We just want to know that you are moving around the house in a way that makes logical sense. Say you're getting up at the right time during the day, getting your walk from the kitchen to the bedroom to the bathroom, and so simple things like that. And then you're sleeping on time, eating on time. So that's what we call as daily living routines. And that's what we wanted to know, right? So, and that was enough information for me to know, A, that they're okay, or B, something is amiss and I need to contact them and find out what's going on. And having this information actually made my conversations with them so much better, because, I wasn't asking them, to take your meds. I said, I saw you miss taking your meds. What happened? Were you out? And then the conversations would become more engaging. So that's another thing that came out of it, right? So my personal discovery was that the quality of my relationship with my parents improved significantly.
Can I ask you a question about something that Ashwini and I have been observing, both in our personal lives and the people that we've been talking to, is that it would be really helpful if we could shortcut some of the ramp to information. What I mean by that is, for those of us who are trying to stay in touch with our parents or grandparents around their health, if we were to be able to be passively updated with information on a regular basis, then we could shortcut some of the back and forth and some of the emotional challenges of having conversations or reliving conversations or reliving information. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, because it sounds like you accomplished some of that with your first iteration with your parents as you were working on this technology.
So we oftentimes don't know what is going on inside the house, and you can't rely on the person that you're caring for to be forthcoming about what's going on with them. Ask your mom and dad, they'll always say, "Oh, I'm doing fine. Nothing is wrong with me." Right? So that
But
information.
I'm also always doing fine, to be clear. Like, it's not a mom and dad thing. That's an all of us thing. Like, you ask your kid, you ask your friend,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, that's
how are you
true.
doing? I'm okay. I'm
Fine.
fine. So that's not a dig on older
Yeah,
folks.
yeah.
That's just like
No,
a
and
thing.
and it comes from the right place. As parents, they don't want us to worry about them. So it just is how the system works. And you have to respect them for that, right? So they're like, "Oh, you're busy with your kids and family. Don't worry about us."
The fact that you're transitioning from being their child to their caregiver in some capacity, and that's a little bit of a weird transition to
Right.
make. And parents will lie. They'll say, I'm fine, because they don't want to worry you. But there's also a concern there. There's a desire for independence, a desire to remain autonomous, that I think they resist care from people who
Yeah.
mean well. And of course, children sometimes overstep those boundaries. So there's that push and pull there that I think also.
Absolutely. And oftentimes I think what happens to them is the information that they're being handed over, like whether it's their physicians, their clinicians, it's so overwhelming that sometimes they don't understand that. So you need to sort of work with them to ask the right questions, understand better. So there's a whole information exchange process that is very complicated. Some because there are reservations or inhibitions about sharing. Sometimes they don't want to share it. Sometimes they don't remember to tell you, right? So it can be that as well. That sort of sets the stage for why having something passive works, because if 80% of the information I get knowing their patterns and they're doing okay, then the 20% is reserved for the more important questions that you want to ask.
I hope that as we adopt other technologies, we can get used to this concept of passively updating people in general, because that helps us all. Because there's so many things to talk about on any given day, and then we have to sync up when we can talk about them and have a conversation. So then you have to
Exactly.
coordinate the conversation. I mean, just relaying information can take 90 minutes of prep work. It's just like,
Right,
really,
right.
like that's so painful. It becomes so hard for us to manage it. If you could just like let me in a passive way, But that's hard, right? Like, not every family is as transparent. Not every person within every family has earned the same level of transparency. So I'm not saying that it's an easy thing, but I appreciate that about your technology. And I'm hopeful that as we continue to engage with technology as caregivers and as older folks, as we also age, we can start appreciating that passively updating people on our status can actually be really
Yeah.
helpful and impactful.
I'd actually like to ask a question here. Could you walk us through what you've seen in the market in terms of how AI is being received by senior communities, so facilities that care for seniors, but also the elderly population themselves? I know they're, not as familiar with technology as maybe the younger generations are. How is it being perceived right now?
When it comes to just pure AI, right, there is a general sense of curiosity about it, where we see the market today. I mean, people want to lean in and learn more about what it can do. And in an industry which is dependent on human engagement, human interaction, the responsible use of that AI is critical, right? So I come across a lot of companies that are building robots to help you in the home. And as a community, I think we have to decide whether, that is the right tool for my parents. In some cases, it may be, in some cases, it may not. But where ethics come into it is, what am I trying to do here, right? So am I just, offloading my responsibility to a machine, or I still want to be duty bound and care and love my parents in a way, and how do I express that even while using the technology and the tools? So it's a healthy balance of bringing that human component, a human aspect to it, and using technology to improve, maybe optimize and increase efficiencies. You are processing a lot of data points, movement patterns, for example, eating habits, deterioration, things like that. Where AI can help is, digest that information and make it easy for someone to just consume that in a simpler form. And the variables, when you're working with elderly, are significant, right? So I think we sort of realize that in order for us, and we're still early stage right now, in order for us to completely fulfill what we have to do for someone to thrive in their homes, we still have to put a lot more technology in practice. So we've barely surface scratched with what we have done with just the motion sensors. And our first goal was to, go out and make motion a vital sign, try and use that as a means to decide, if they're doing okay or not. We want to sort of see that being treated the same way as you would treat like a blood pressure or your heart rate or your respiratory rate. And I think motion and sleep are two sort of bookends of this, which will try to complete the solution. The sleep is important because, you are trying to work with a lot of people who are, as they age, get agitated. There's anxiety and there's depression. So that signal kind of tells you how to help them stay calm and stay peaceful in their homes, right? And there are long-term effects of that being untreated because, it can lead to dementia and then the Alzheimer's and other things. So we're trying to, where we are today, I think, is very early stages of where the ideal solution of this can be. But that's a good challenge for a startup to have.
What in an ideal world, if Zemplee reaches new heights, what are you hoping to accomplish?
Zemplee should be about aging in place. There were two metaphorical meanings to it. One was, where you are physically aging in place, as in, I want to live where I want to live and maximize the benefit of that environment. And then also biologically age in place. So, I want to remain where I am at my health level. So it sort of brings us into that longevity spectrum. So it was, how do I increase the well span of my life? Because, we're human beings, we are going to deteriorate over time. It's just biologically not possible for us. But how do I extend my well span so that I can get the best of what life has to offer? We started on the sort of the safety and well-being as a spectrum, one end of it, and now we're moving more and more towards the longevity aspect of it. And I know that, starting at the right time is where is what is going to make a huge difference. So the more you ignore your health parameters, it's much harder when you get older. And also behaviorally, right? You have to be at an age where you can change your lifestyle. Once you go past 80, it's very hard to do it.
I think that's key. I mean, I was speaking with my folks about that the other night, and one of them had talked to a doc, and the doc said, "Well, you're gonna die the way you lived. If you were drinking, it's gonna be your liver. If you're smoking, it's gonna." He was just like super blunt about it. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's a really aggressive conversation." But as we were talking about it around the table, it was like, well, if you want or can change your behavior, you've got to do it earlier, because if you do it later, it doesn't actually make that much of a difference.
Yeah.
Um, related to in some ways how technology changes our behavior. I've seen people talk to Siri now, or say, "Hey Alexa," but "Hey Siri" on phones. I'm wondering how you contextualize Zemplee being different than engagement with these other devices that people are now putting in their homes, right? Like, I've got the Google stuff, or I've got the Alexa stuff. How should we think about it being different?
So, voice technology eliminates the whole level of entry barrier. If I'm not able to type in because of the form factor, or I may have, arthritic fingers, Zemplee has always been, giving access to people, giving access to care, giving access to information has always been at the crux of how we envisioned our solution. And Zemplee integrates with Alexa, and we use Alexa as a way to communicate with people. So, for example, our system detects that there's something inconsistent going on in the home. A notification would go out to the caregiver, and then whether it's a family caregiver or a professional caregiver, and then the caregiver can just drop in using Alexa into someone's home and says, "Mom, are you doing okay?" Or do you need help? I don't know if this is just the world we live in, right? Phones are becoming a major device for victimizing elders, because it's so easy to call in, and there's spam calls and phishing calls that come in. If I were to tell my parents, I'll tell them, don't answer any unknown calls that are coming into your phone. And so if you are being targeted, you're obviously, your first response is to not answer any phone calls. So phone increasingly is becoming not the preferred choice of communication unless it's originating from the elderly themselves, right? And so Alexa bridges that gap for us. So back to your point about technology in home, again, I think being conscious about responsible use of that technology. Ethics play a lot into it. I definitely don't want to listen to anything that is private or confidential. As long as it doesn't, we don't need to know it, we don't need to know it. Also, what are you going to do with all that information unless you can use it for something? And Zemplee has always been HIPAA compliant, so we collect a lot of data, but that is to the benefit of our clients. We've always been about how do I collect this information so I can be a better caregiver to whoever is seeking care. And at some point, I think as a company, when somebody's trusting us, we become custodians of that trust, and we have to uphold it. We have to be that person who is their advocate when it comes to data and the privacy. So in Zemplee, we take that very seriously. And that's how I think the world should be. I mean, I think we are being responsible for someone. We are taking care of someone. So we have to embrace their needs, their notions of privacy, their ideas about what can be done with the data that they're sharing with us.
So a lot of our listeners are seniors themselves or caretakers. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about how Zemplee can be used in the real world. I know from my research, you sell to senior living facilities and assisted living facilities, but there are also options to have Zemplee in your private residence. Could you give us examples of each and how Zemplee has helped that senior or that family?
Yeah, so Zemplee works with facilities and home care agencies. So if you want to get the Zemplee in your facility, you either work with the facilities, decision makers who would then work with us to deploy it into the facilities. And if it's home care, same thing. We work through an agency that will service or install and set up Zemplee for the clients. We're not a direct-to-consumer product yet, but that's something that we're thinking of down the line. For the senior living communities, we help them by bringing a level of efficiency within their operation. So it's a sale to the organization, and the organizations benefit from adding that additional level of care that they offer to their residents inside the facilities. And I think even in many cases, it is a tool for the caregiver to be a better caregiver, and just, increases a level of care by an order of magnitude. There's so much data that can be used to plan your care plan better, right? Mostly the value proposition for a facility is about increasing the length of stay of the resident in their facilities, primarily because it is a lower care setting. So Zemplee is all about, going back to that biological age in place. We want to keep you in your setting for as long as you can before your needs change. So extending that, even if it's by a week or a day or a month, goes a long way in generating those efficiencies. In the home care, of course, it's the quality of life. Nothing beats the quality of life of being in a home and receiving care in a home. The value proposition is still the same, but there is a different perspective of how they derive the benefits from the same tool.
The benefits to preventing falls and responding to falls quickly, I don't think can be understated, as once, there are so many different things that could create a fall situation, and then the impacts of that can be devastating or can be mitigated, but are often really challenging. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen between the difference of fall detection and fall prevention? Because there are two different parts of like a response or a management strategy to falls, which are a big part of lives when we get older.
If you ask anyone what is your biggest concern when it comes to a resident that you're caring for, or a parent or a loved one that you're caring for, falls is up there, number one. Where the industry is today, there are a lot of tools that help you detect fall quickly, and that is important too, right? So you want to attend to a person if they've had a fall. And there are categories of that, right? Like there's fall with no injury, fall with injury, fall with major injury, where you might have to like go to the ER or get hospitalized. And so the sooner you discover, the better. Where Zemplee helps is, the way we monitor people inside the home. The first thing we can do is help with earlier discovery. We've had one client who, had an Apple Watch on his wrist, and they had a fall, but they fell on the wrong side, and the watch didn't register the impact, and so couldn't report the fall. But our system acted as a fallback and notified the family member that, we think your mom is in a fall situation. And the person was ever so thankful for us that we at least reported it, right? So what I feel is, as more and more technology comes into play, redundancy, adding redundant layers actually helps. So all said and done, you can prevent a fall from happening. People are going to fall. It is natural. Even a healthy person while walking down the street can have a fall. Where we see Zemplee playing the role is how to preempt a fall from happening through training, helping them with situational guidance, situational advice, and that we do through our Alexa integration. So, for example, we know that a person is sitting in a chair for the last 4 hours, and if they have they have an Alexa instance implemented in their homes, we can, as soon as they get up from the chair, we can kind of push out a message to the Alexa saying, "Hey, I just noticed you got out of the chair or bed, count to 10 before you start walking. And so stabilize yourselves, grab a walker, grab your cane, don't forget to." So we can give this situational guidance to people as they're kind of going through their daily lives. And every piece of advice that is given reinforces, right? So we tend to forget things. I mean, and sometimes we don't take these things seriously, right? But having that advice given in a timely manner helps with the behavior shaping. A large number of falls happen because this might sound very strange. You're sitting on the chair, the doorbell rings outside, and you're trying to get up to open the door. And that's when that initial rush will make you trip and fall. And believe it or not, we have seen that happen many times. So what we're trying to tell them is, don't rush, right? It's okay. The bell can ring. take your time and then walk slowly towards. So that's how we want to be involved in helping them manage themselves better. So what we can dispel is, valuable guidance and advice. And we work with a lot of, subject matter experts to put this content together.
I think something that you just said will resonate with listeners with a little bit of double click. So just some context here. In sitting and standing up, especially as we get older, our blood pressure can change. And with blood pressure changing, we can have lightheadedness. Sitting up and standing down can be associated with that. Sometimes that can be medically related to like a medication or another underlying condition. Sometimes it's just us getting older. Same thing for nausea. Sometimes we can feel nauseous, not just lightheaded, but a sense of nausea in those situations. And sometimes we can just get up and try to move quickly and trip on a rug or something else in the house. And so it's important to be aware of our surroundings and set up our surroundings for success.
How does your system distinguish between someone idling in place or kind of just lingering in a specific area as opposed to perhaps a fall happening? And how accurate is your system? How are you guys thinking through false positives, things like that, that maybe some caregivers might be anxious about when it comes to leveraging AI for these kinds of use cases?
We're probably in the early stages of it. So in many cases, we constantly debate about improving our false positive rates, but somehow, call it a founder's preference. I err on the side of, I want to know, so don't dial down the false positives for me. And then we leave the choice to the end user, right? So people can dial up, dial down, tighten up the way the alerts come out. So what the way the system works, if we notice an anomaly in a behavior pattern and fall happens to be one of those anomalies, we notify someone, right? An alert goes out on their phone, on the system. And then the expected interaction is, you'll call in and check to see what's going on. And where the AI plays into role is it's inferring a lot of things from the data, right? So I know that her behavior pattern normally is this, and this is what I've observed about this person over the last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So now, if I know that her usual habit is, she gets up in the morning, she's now after finishing her morning activities, she's sitting in her favorite chair, watching her favorite show on the TV. I'm sort of observing that pattern. When I say observing, the AI is observing this pattern. And we know that, at some point, if she gets up, the sensors will tell us that she got up from the chair. We're expecting to see her in the next room. If you get up from the chair, the obvious assumption is that you're going to walk to either to the kitchen or the bathroom. And if for any reason you don't make that path, then the system knows that something is amiss, and it's possible that you had a fall, because when you get up from the chair, those are the two things that could happen. You got dizzy, you lost your balance, and you fell, or something was in the way and you tripped. So that's how the system is learning about the person through their movement pattern. So movement, like I said, it becomes a vital sign for us.
With movement being your vital sign, what kinds of sensors do the facilities or the at-home agencies have to install?
Yeah, so Zemplee's sensor kit will include three types of sensors. Motion sensors is one of the primary ones. It gets placed in, every room. They're like your typical security grade motion sensors. So, you're placing them high up on the wall. And those sensors are just observing your movement patterns. When you move into a room, the sensor trips and tells us you're in this room. The other type of sensors we use are open close sensors, and that's for the doors. And we also put that sensor on a refrigerator door because we now know you're attempting to hydrate or eat or dine, right? So that's our proxy for knowing that, okay, you're going about your daily life. And then the third type of sensors are pressure sensors that go on furnitures like your chair and your bed. And those are the ones that are sensing you, whether you're sitting or, you're lying in your bed. And any transition of state, whether you are, resting to movement, movement to resting, those are the ones that we track. And that gives us a pattern of what your movement looks like on an everyday basis.
That makes sense. And for our listeners who have family members who live in facilities, if that facility has Zemplee deployed in the room, how would that listener see the data? Or is it the facility that's monitoring their family member?
Yeah. And when we work with the facilities, usually the facilities, there's a team in the facilities that will be using Zemplee. So we have dashboards that, are showing data. Every second we collect data, it's kind of processed and put back on the dashboard. So the dashboard becomes a major source of information for the facilities. So that's, and, typically in a facility, there is a dashboard at the central nurse station, which is sort of showing what's going on with every resident in every room. And then the person at the central nurse station will call in and summon help or send help, depending on what the situation may be.
I see. So you're not currently communicating with that resident's family, say if you detected a fall and they were living at a facility.
Yeah, there's no need for us to do it because the facility takes ownership of that. I mean, that's their role, right? Managing care for the people. So,
Okay.
One of the things that we like to wrap up with, if you had 60 seconds, right now, if there were 60 seconds that someone should take right now to pay ourselves and our loved ones forward, what would you recommend that we do?
if you are someone who's looking for a right type of care for your family member, whether it's your mom or dad, definitely look at using technology as a tool to assist you. And then, using passive monitoring has a lot of benefits and Zemplee plays right into that market. So I would definitely want to recommend Zemplee. It's not only helpful for the loved one that you're caring for, it's also peace of mind for yourself. But at the end of the day, the caregiver also has to care for themselves. Being a caregiver is a hard job.
Absolutely.
So
Very important for all of us to take good care of ourselves and also try our best to take care of those around us to the best of our ability. I would encourage all of our listeners as well to advocate for the use of this technology with their agencies they might be using for their in-home care or as they're exploring placement options for their family member. Ask and try and understand more about what kind of technology that facility is leveraging to make sure that your family member is getting the best care possible, and also to make sure that the technology they're using respects their privacy to the level that you would like that to be respected. Zemplee is being really mindful of that. That might not always be the case with other providers, so please keep that in mind as you educate yourself on this too. Cool. Thank you so much, Aparna. We really appreciate your time.
thanks for having me. Lovely talking to both of you. And and if you need more information about Zemplee, you're welcome to visit us at zemplee.com.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Yo, great work.
Hi.
That was awesome.
I feel like I learned so much. I think what really stands out to me is the way that Zemplee is hitting the market. I think it's very interesting that they chose to go through home care agencies as the way to distribute the product. I hadn't thought of that.
I think even for our listeners to understand some of the language that we use around like getting to the market, I mean, it's really hard to innovate in this space. And by space, I mean aging. It is challenging. The concerns that we hear all the time are related to coordinating information and communication. They're related to ensuring that care is provided. They're related to a labor market that is not going to be there, both from a registered nurse perspective all the way down to someone who's helping with activities of daily living. And so when we talk about the space and we talk about the market opportunities here, everyone knows that we need to make changes and innovate here. But it's not always obvious where to do it, where to make sure that there's a win-win or a win-win-win. And so that's, I mean, you and I are wrestling with that for people listening to this, understanding that, what we're going through in real time as we're trying to build a company together. So it's just a really, I agree. I thought that was a really interesting call out that you made too, for sure.
I also think it's so interesting that they're leveraging Alexa and voice tooling. Erin and I have been talking about this for quite a while now, just how seniors interact with phones and need to speak, and how text-based communication isn't ideal for seniors in terms of just their dexterity and how they might interact with the world and what they're comfortable with. And we were really thinking about phones as the way that they communicate with the world. And I hadn't even thought of Alexa as a voice tool that could be used for these use cases. So, and even the fraud case that you brought up of spam calls and how, with AI nowadays, it's very easy to emulate the voice of a loved one, or, those phishing attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. So Alexa might be a really interesting technology to use to dispel some of that risk.
Yeah, I was thinking about when I'm 90, do I only have a rotary phone in my house? You know what I mean? Like how do I get away from all of that noise? But those hacks of, trying to think about those in-home technologies a little bit differently, that's a cool thought and like worth contemplating more. Because if I'm going to change my behavior, I better do it before I'm 80 years old. Like it's going to be really hard to do when I'm 80, you know?
I mean, the phrasing of "you can't teach an old dog new tricks," I think is becoming truer and truer. You get quite stuck in your routines. You appreciate your life being the way it is. You desire consistency. And sometimes that consistency involves bad habits and bad lifestyle choices that over time are going to catch up to you. And I think that's a big, over the course of recording this podcast, that's something I've learned is that, healthy habits pay back in dividends as we get older. And so the sooner we can adopt those lifestyle changes, the better.
I drink way too much caffeinated soda. There's some behind my laptop screen and camera screen right now back there so yeah, I need to work on that. I need to change that. There's also, um there's a moment in this podcast that she mentioned, people wanting to die in their home. And I think that's worth a conversation. I think it depends on culture. I think it depends on family. I think there's stigma associated with that before and after for different family members. And in the course of our conversations that we're having this season and in the future seasons, talking about and highlighting these issues where there could be multiple perspectives, and to be a little prepared for them could be helpful. There are these conversations that I think there's a balance. We've heard some of our guests talk about balance being required, but I think there's a balance in us being able to talk about how we end our lives in our homes. And if we can't talk about that, then I think we limit the potential for pretty incredible outcomes in the last parts of our days.
I mean, one phrase that Aparna used in the episode was expanding your well period, I believe is what she said. And that's just
Yeah,
the
wealth line or health line or
or
something. Yeah.
helpline or something. I'll go back and hear exactly what she said. But basically, what I think she was trying to get at is the period of your life where you are able to enjoy your day-to-day routine, you're savoring your retirement years, and you are not experiencing any seriously debilitating ailment or limitation. And I think what we need to have the conversations we need to have with our families and with ourselves is, how do we want those years to seem? Where do we want those to take place? Is that in a retirement community with a golf course? That's totally fine. Is that in your home with your grandchildren and your family? It's up to you to decide, right? But you need to have those conversations, and also know that the desire that your parents or your elderly family members may have is their desire, respecting that and coming to terms with it on your own. Because even if, for example, you may not want someone passing away in your childhood home, that is also their home. And if that is something they desire, you have to have that personal discussion with your family member to come common ground there. And I think your statement on it being cultural is very accurate. I can speak for Indian culture, especially from Aparna, since she's a family friend. We have very similar cultural backgrounds. It is absolutely the case that our seniors want to stay at home as long as possible, and they want to pass away in that home. That is a very common statement in our culture. And also, given the number of people that are retiring and reaching senior age, there's just not going to be enough beds for everyone to move into these facilities. So a lot of people are going to have to make their homes as comfortable as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah, Ashwini, those are wonderful points. The concept of extending, how much time we have to be healthy was a really good call out. Um, the longer we have, like that our parents and that we live, also the longer kids have to manage conversations. So just a side note on being children of aging parents here, for those of us who are that. There's this adage that Ashwini and I have come across a couple times now, that the person that's farthest away from our parents knows best. And that's a joke and that's an irony, because the reality is that the person that's furthest away is likely not getting, passive updates. They're likely not getting as many active updates either. They're not seeing things around the practical improvements or the practical declines and frailties that, family members are undergoing. And so I think there's a really big thing here around making sure that you as a caregiver and as a family figure out ways and mechanisms of communicating early and honoring the fact that if you are far away and someone else is closer, your opinion is probably, but not necessarily, certainly, but probably less informed than the person who's closer. Aparna was talking about getting on a plane and seeing her folks, right? So, relationships matter, high touch, communication matters for as long as possible. As if you're able to do that, keep that. So just a note, because caregiving is hard. And if you're far away, you may feel like you know best because it's hurting you too. And it's really challenging. And if someone's closer, they're probably seeing more and getting more information just by being closer.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining the Palm Estate podcast today with Zemplee founder and CEO Aparna Pujar. To make sure you don't miss our next conversations, subscribe. You can also visit our website at palmestate.com for more insights and resources on the topics we covered today. Share what you learned on social media. We are on x.com, and you can also put us in message groups with your family members, whether or not those are in WhatsApp groups or elsewhere. It's a great way for others to discover the conversations that we're having and the ones that you've been a part of. We do appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.